Hello, everyone. Guys, gals, and pals. I'm Emilio, my pronouns are he, him, and joining me is Callum.
My pronouns are also he, him. Welcome to Take 2, baby.
Woo! Through the magic of editing, you get to see us at our totally high energy.
Yeah.
Coming at you at a nice, I don't want to date this episode, but we are definitely recording this on a weekday.
It's weird to schedule these on weekdays. We normally do weekends. Also, I'm gonna just throw some things out there for future Emilio to hate me for. Explosion.
You want me to edit those in, don't you?
Yeah. Just like just a JPEG of an explosion. Just make it like cartwheel across the screen.
Well, hang on, Callum. You're making me push the limits of a very limited free
No, we had a very loud seems like the wrong adjective there, but we had a very insistent commenter who said that we should be using more visuals.
Well, then again, if you're listening to this on the audio side of things, Spotify, welcome, number one. Number two, please give us a favorable rating. But number three, do you think we need more visuals?
That you can't ask them.
Yeah.
Do you think we need more audio?
Yeah, we need more audio. I know it's a trend for a lot of podcasts to have drops, but I don't know. It feels like having drops would make us less of a podcast and more like just a show that we do on the internet, you know? Like a radio show.
What's a drop?
Drops are when people have like pre-recorded sound bites that they play when the podcast is going on. Like
like a soundboard?
Yeah, like a soundboard. They're called drops.
Why did we need a new word for that? We already had a word for that. It was soundboard.
The soundboard is the collection of things. The individual things are called drops.
Oh. Okay. Well.
And if we're talking about completely unrelated things while delaying the start of the episode, then you gotta know that we're gonna be talking about the history of Overpromise. Ooh,
yep.
It's finally here. The title of this episode is actually called Cyberpunk, History of Overpromise. And
before we get into it, yeah, we know slightly something else did this one already.
Look.
We planned this video out like months ago and they beat us to it.
Yeah, it's a very unfortunate problem that Slightly Something Else is also a gaming podcast that does somewhat overlap. You know, I know in one of the recent episodes they were talking politics. Ooh.
Oh,
Yahtzee
no.
Talking politics and kind of totally stealing our thing. But I think they were focusing more on overhype, not necessarily overpromise. And you'll understand why when you get into the episode, exactly why this is a different thing and whether or not it is a fundamental issue to the system of the games industry and what we can really do about it and how we should think about it in terms of a game buying public. So to start us off, I think it's probably good to differentiate between for example, what is overhype and what is overpromise. So why don't you give us your definition, Callum?
Okay. You're really throwing me under the bus here because this was your section to research. Hype, I guess.
Well, you give me your take on it, and I will help refine it. This is like a smelting process. You're coming up with the ore. I'm gonna smelt it into an ingot.
Yes. This is the dumb cup, smart cup strategy. Anyway, overpromise is when you say certain things will appear in your game, and they don't. They just don't. Like you say that the game will have a fully customizable character, and then you find out that you can only customize their shoes or something by putting on new shoes. And hype, I would say, is when you have an aggressive marketing campaign that just drums up excitement for the game regardless of what's in it. So you would say things like vague things, like it's the greatest shooting game of all time.
That's a very succinct definition. So to get more into it, it's important to keep in your mind, dear viewer, that there are two sides to every game release. There is the back end and the front end. And on the back end, we've got people like the actual developers, their publishers, the news media outlets, places like Kotaku, all of those kinds of things. And then on the front end, you've got the actual game buying public. Maybe you might have reviewers. I can't speak today. Depending on where you want to draw the line. Like, for example, if you're working at IGN, you're more of on the back end, sure, because there are certainly relationships between large game review companies and the actual people who are providing the games. But then maybe you have someone like Jim Sterling, and they're an outsider to that process, so maybe they're a little bit on the front end. But the point is that you have these two groups, and for a lot of reasons, they actually kind of have contrary opinions, contrary goals, rather. For the game buying public, every gamer wants to buy the best game they've ever played. Wouldn't you say that's true, Callum?
I mean, definitely, yeah. If you hear the game's going to be the best, I don't know, business management sim ever, and you're really into business management sims, you're definitely going to try and find the best one.
Exactly. For the gamer, every gamer wants to buy the best game that they've ever played, and generally speaking, they want to pay as little as possible for it. That's not necessarily always true. There are some people who will pay, disproportionately for games. But generally speaking, what you as a gamer want is to have the best possible experience at the lowest possible cost. Well, the games, the back-end side of it, the industry, they want the kind of opposite. They want to put as little effort into the game as possible and sell it for as high a price as possible.
Yeah, it's the Pringles philosophy. You know how Pringles, they're... I don't know, what would you call the people who make Pringles? The development team?
The manufacturers?
Yeah, there we go. That's the word.
I know we're not all Web 2.0 here. Yeah. People still make things, guys. We don't digitize our food into...
I've been doing this podcast for too long. The manufacturers of Pringles, a few years ago, they changed companies, and now they are making the Pringles, like the chips themselves, slightly smaller, with slightly less flavor, as well as the cans, so that they can produce more.
Yes, and listeners at home who are familiar with more Marxian critiques of the economic system will recognize this as a fundamental contradiction. Right, there is a contradiction at play here, and generally speaking, in sort of a capitalist world, that contradiction is quite simple. You as a worker want to work as little as possible for as much money as possible, and your employer wants the opposite. They want you to work as hard as possible for as little as possible. And generally speaking, those contradictions end up in very terrible places, either with labor strikes or in more likely scenarios, people getting retrenched. The games industry is not necessarily fundamentally different. If you've ever seen a lot of the cycles of mass layoffs, retrenchments that follow what is otherwise huge, massive video game launches. And the point that I'm getting to here is that we have to be very careful about what it is that we are buying as a product. Increasingly, and we've talked about this in other episodes, you are not necessarily buying a video game. Right? A lot of the times, especially with AAA games, you are also trying to buy you're also buying an experience. And whether or not that experience is persistent is actually not necessarily true. So to swing that tangent all the way back, the difference between overpromise and overhype really has to do with who is doing it, why are they doing it, and how is it affecting basically either the back end or the front end. So generally speaking, overhype is something that happens in the consumer side of things, right? So for example, if the media company, let's say for example EA, are overhyping their marketing campaign is overhyping, or a great example, Warcraft, right? Everyone remembers the Blizzard conference where they announced that they were going to do a Warcraft 3 remaster. I was even hyped for that because I like Warcraft 3. And the idea that they were going to fundamentally improve the gameplay experience with additional cutscenes and new high quality renders, and all the units were getting updated. It felt really, really good. But the end product was not necessarily well received.
And
now,
if I can just jump on there for a second, do you remember the, I think it was like last year's E3 or the year before? I don't know if we had E3 last year, but one of the previous E3s where they announced Metroid 4 or something?
Yeah.
that's a great example of just pure hype, because the announcement for Metroid 4 was literally just the title. It was just a video with the title. And if you guys can remember from our many, many breadcrumb segments of What the Fuck Todd, the announcement trailer for Elder Scrolls 6 was also just the title of the game on like running footage of a background. And that's just hype. That tells you nothing about the game, and it's literally just there to drum up excitement for the already diehard fans.
Yeah, exactly. Overhype is something. Hype in general is a product of a media cycle. The idea is that the games company wants to create interest in their game. That's why they're hyping it up. And as Callum mentioned, they deliberately try to be vague. You can't get vaguer than just the title drop on a video, right? You have no idea what they're not telling you anything about the game. They're not telling you anything about the features. Overpromise, on the other hand, is where the games company are deliberately trying to tell you one thing about the way the game will be, but they don't actually either intend to do it, or they consistently downplay their ability to actually deliver on that actual promise, right? Hype is not necessarily something that is bad. You can be very excited for a video game, and certainly many people are. But and of course, that's not to say that these two ideas are mutually exclusive. You can overhype a game and also overpromise it. In fact, sometimes there is a mutual relationship here, where the overpromise of a game is delivered by the hype of the game. But to give a more clear-cut example, I would say that Half-Life 3 is probably one of the good examples of a rather innocuous kind of overhype that was primarily delivered on the consumer end. Because not only did Valve never say anything about what Half-Life 3 was going to be like, they didn't promise anything. The problem was the game buying public had developed this idea of what the game should be, and they had driven themselves into hype about it. And so it became increasingly more difficult to meet the expectations of what Half-Life 3 was going to be, because Half-Life 3 was, the Half-Life series was so well received, so on and so forth. But Valve didn't do anything. They didn't promise that Half-Life 3 was going to be the greatest FPS game ever made. They didn't do any of that. In fact, Valve is probably a good example because they kind of deliberately keep a tight lip on what it is that they are actually trying to be doing. However,
so Emilio,
yes,
would you say that overhype or overpromise is worse?
Ooh, that's a good question.
Which is the worst of the two?
I think overhype is kind of inevitable, right? I think that it's the nature of people with our modern interconnected media to become excited about things. And I think it's kind of impossible in certain senses to avoid overhype. I think the problem is overpromise, right? Because stop me if you've heard this before, but what will happen is a game will come out. Let's take, for example, a game that I'm fond of making fun of, Anthem. You have a game that comes out, the developers, the company, the publishers, they're all promising this is going to be an amazing game, it's going to have a great ecosystem, this is going to be the Destiny killer or whatever, and it's going to be a live service model. They're going to extend the service life. This is a game you're going to be playing for years, they promise. And they say, and they say, and they say, and then the game comes out, it's buggy, there are features missing, it's very heavily monetized, and slowly but surely, what happens? They start to walk back the promises to you as a consumer. You've paid them money, right? You've given them your money for the thing that you were expecting, and slowly but surely they walk it back until eventually they kill it quietly and just move on. They just drop the bag, throw it off the cliff, and move on and pretend as if it didn't exist. Right? Yeah. Anthem, what are you talking about? Everyone is playing Apex Legends now. Anthem? That was never a thing. And,
you mean those songs that every country has for some reason?
Yeah. It wouldn't surprise me if they paid, like Google for the search engine optimization to deliberately, shift around some results. But yeah, for me, I think it comes down to this, right? You can be overhype a game as far as you want, but that's still the hype of the game. Until you've actually paid for it, that's when the threshold moves from, okay, they overhyped the game, I haven't paid for it yet, therefore it's whatever in my mind. But as soon as I've paid for it and I'm starting to play it, that's when they've got me. That's when something that might be harmless, like for example overhype, becomes something pernicious like overpromise, because increasingly what we're finding is that a lot of companies are overpromising on what they can deliver.
Yeah, and if I can go at the other end of that though, It's that I don't think hype is necessarily worse than overpromise, but here's the situation for me. An overpromised game is still a game that exists. Half-Life 3 is never going to come out. It just won't. It will never come out because there's no way it could ever match up. And, Steam just, it needs to maintain a certain level of success to stay afloat.
Steam, Valve. I do think there will be a third Half-Life. It'll just be a VR game that I will be too poor to be able to play. Well, I will see the whole game on YouTube.
There was a third Half-Life, Half-Life Alyx. But, there's just... We're never going to get the Half-Life 3 that was quote-unquote promised, because it takes so long that fans can start putting expectations on it. Like, Game of Thrones Season 8, how disappointing it was?
Yes.
If that had been made, like...
Well, you see, there's an example of where overhype and overpromise are moving kind of in tandem. Granted, I would probably say that a hype was maybe more of a driving factor than the promise, because, I don't think they necessarily promised anything but a conclusion, but maybe the conclusion that they delivered was bad. But let me come at this from a different angle, because I think it's important here to make a differentiation. Callum, do you think that consumers are more responsible for this current trend, right? And let me ask you in two ways. So firstly, do you think that consumers are very responsible for hype? Are we the ones that primarily drive the hype machine, or is the hype machine driven for us by companies that keep telling us, what to expect from their games?
I'd say it's like a 60-40 split, where it's 40% on the consumers and 60% on the marketers.
I tend to agree. In some respects, because I do think that we don't, like you and I, we don't control the games that get made. Well, gaming
maybe
industry...
you don't. My dark influences reach deep into the gaming industry.
It does explain why I've been seeing so many card-based roguelikes on Steam recently.
Yes.
You've been playing Magic the Gathering, haven't you?
A lot.
You know what? Maybe one day we should play Magic together on stream.
Oh, definitely! I will crush you.
Yeah, the audience can watch me get destroyed.
Yeah, because I've been spending the last few months ignoring social obligations and building decks on Arena.
I've got a couple of decks built, but I've been playing other games, which I can talk about when we do the games of 2021.
How the fuck did we get here?
This is what happens when you record on a weekday. But again, to circle everything back. So if it is the case that it's about a 60-40 split, which is fine, I can agree that a 60-40 split is fine. What about overpromise, right? Because do you think, here's an argument that I can imagine someone throw back at maybe a podcast like this. Like, games companies don't want to make bigger and better games. They just have to, because the game public wants bigger and better games, right?
Oof.
Therefore,
that voice. Gosh.
Subscribe to the Patreon for more voices like that.
I love it when you talk to me dirty like that.
But yeah, like I can definitely see an argument that the reason why all overpromise is becoming a bigger problem is that it's not the game's company's fault. They're not overpromising and underdelivering. It's the game audience. Everyone wants every game to be bigger and better than the one that came before it. So every company has to face these hardline desires, and if they don't do it, if they don't deliver, then no one's going to like their game. So unfortunately, they're in the bind. The big, powerful, the
multi-billionaire companies are the ones that are being bullied.
Yeah, totally. The small indie studio EA Publishing.
EA for this year's Sundance film. No, it's I can see where that point would have its moments. Gosh, I can't talk today either. There's a definite truth in what that person is saying, that fictional person that you created, in that the want and the market for bigger and better things will drive to a certain extent the creation of bigger and better things. But you also have to look at it from the angle of, if game developers keep facilitating that desire, then we're going to keep expecting it, because we know that they can.
Yeah, exactly. See, the thing is, we have to understand this in terms of power, right? I think it's always important to, when you're doing these kinds of analyses, is to look at it from the perspective of power. Who has the actual power here in this terrible relationship that we've gotten into with the industry? The answer is not us, it's them. If they're the only ones that can actually, they're the ones that are making the games, therefore they're the ones that have the power to say, our game will be this. You either buy it or you don't, right? And we are going to commit to this promise of producing this game and getting it out by so on and so forth, and we're not going to crunch the employees, because overpromise is probably one of the reasons why crunch is a thing. I remember when the development of Anthem was ongoing, the process, the cycle that BioWare went through was tumultuous and torturous, to say the least. You had project prototypes just like changing almost on a whim, where you would have the team rush and desperately try to cobble together something, only for someone higher up the chain to go, nope, it needs to be more, it needs to do this, it needs to be this, da, da, da. And then the team would have to scrap their work and rush to make the next project prototype. Yeah. And it's the fault of, it's not our fault, because I didn't want a game like Anthem to be made. Everyone was already playing Destiny. It was people who are kind of trying to create products for markets that maybe aren't necessary. That's why there were so many Battle Royale games, even though arguably everyone only plays, I think it's Fortnite nowadays, or at least a majority of people play Fortnite. Amazing that Fortnite is still actually going on, So yeah, it is this problem, with the games development and the games industry as a whole, and it's not something that is necessarily limited to just AAA, right? How often have you seen a game, an indie Kickstarter, come out, ask for a bunch of money, get even more money, and just completely fail to, like, let's take, for example, Mighty Number 9. Do you remember the marketing campaign for Mighty Number 9?
Yeah, it's Mega Man, but it's going to be so much better.
Yeah, it's gonna be everything that you've ever wanted about a Mega Man game, but it's gonna be done better because we're not, beholding to the man, and we've got all this money, and it's actually not being, they're cutting back the development cycle. They're putting a bunch of money into like an animated project that's not really gonna go anywhere. And then boom, here we are.
There's a Dorkly bit that I remember where a character from a Kickstarter game like falls into a glitch and starts talking to the developers, and it's like, well, did you at least include the things that we promised on our Kickstarter, like procedurally generated levels and fully customizable weapons? And it's like, oh yeah, did you know that taxes were a thing? And it's like, yeah, that's basically what it is. It's a bunch of people who have no clue how to run a business, asking for money, and then utterly failing at how to run a business because they got too much capital with not enough knowledge.
Yeah, it's don't think for a second that the idea of overpromise is a thing limited to just the worst corporations on the planet. Well, some of the worst corporations on the planet.
That almost makes like big development companies overpromising that much more sinister, because they should know how this works by now.
Oh yeah, I 100% agree. I think while I don't like it when indie developers do this thing, I think that it has. I would argue that it's like very big Tumblr energy. Do you remember that? There was an attempt to make a show about a shy pansexual and an extroverted asexual, I think it was.
I do not. This show sounds amazing.
There was a show. I remember seeing a Sarah Z video about it. Now, granted, I don't know anything.
Sarah Z. You fake fan.
I don't know how it's supposed to be pronounced, but
they're American. They pronounce their Z like they're fucking Superman villains.
Yeah, that's maybe true. But yeah, there was a video about. She made a video about this kind of show, and it was about how a bunch of people that they took a bunch of money to get something made, And the whole idea was that, like, oh yeah, it's, it's going to be an asexual who's outgoing and a pants person who's, very shy. That's going to be perfect comedy. And the Kickstarter ended up getting a lot. I think it was called Outgoing or something like that. No, I can't remember the name. But it was a sitcom, and the Kickstarter developed, and they got a bunch of money. And they were like, oh, we'll be able to shoot this entire TV show for like a couple $1,000s. And, we'll be able to get like DVD space. It's like, no, you don't understand the realities of like developing a TV show.
Yeah.
You're naive.
Oh my god.
You fool.
You could maybe buy like a decent camera for like a few $1,000s. What are you talking about?
You sweet summer child. You have no idea how this is going to go. But these were people who are amateurs that have never really made anything, of their own. They haven't really done anything. EA, on the other hand, is one of the most wealthy corporations on the face of the planet. So the idea that they don't know how to do it, I agree with you, is very sinister. And of course, speaking of sinister, we have to address the cyber elephant in the cyber room. But what about CD Projekt Red, Callum?
Ooh. Let me tell you a story, Amelia.
You took a drag on that virtual cigarette like you were like the most hard-boiled cyberpunk detective in the history of Blade Runner always owes you royalties at that one.
You met me in a smoky bar and asked me, I need you to tell me about Cyberpunk, and I need you to tell me about CD Projekt Red, and I just like...
Yeah, you take a huge puff.
You want to hear the history. Huh?
You drink a sip of like whiskey,
apple
and then you
juice.
apple juice. Yeah, the apple juice is the expensive thing because like whiskey is all synthetic, but the apple juice is still made with real apples. But anyway, and then you're like, "Well, kid, lay it on me, Callum.
Pull up a chair? Why don't you pull up a cyber chair?"
Yeah. So tell me about
that joke. That's a good example of a joke exploding on the runway. Okay, so CD Projekt Red, they're the company that made The Witcher 3, if you don't know that. You probably know the game better than the company. They were, for a long time, the patron saints of gaming. Everyone, including me for a few errant months, thought that they were this, like, magical, wonderful company that gives you free DLCs. Just out of nowhere. They give you a ton of awesome stuff that comes with a game just by, buying it. And it was a brilliant marketing decision because we were at that point living in a time where a DLC for a certain game meant the rest of the game. And now we're getting a full game, but a full game with other stuff for free for no reason other than because it's fun and they want us to have it. That sounded brilliant, beautiful. It was exactly the kind of gaming that we all wanted. And then, around the time that Witcher 3 got put out there, they began developing Cyberpunk 2077. Now, I've done a smidgen of research on this, and a lot of people put the development cycle of Cyberpunk 2077 at roughly 9 years.
That's a long time, but on the other hand, like, how long was the Witcher development cycle?
I have no idea. Didn't research that one. Didn't think I'd need to.
It was at least a couple of years. Plus, they did all the work for the other Witchers. And they were working from books, at least to some extent. But anyway, carry on.
But, yeah, just while we're bringing up other games, you know what one of the most famous overpromised games in the world is?
No. Is it Daikatana?
Well, I did some research on that, but no. It's Duke Nukem Forever.
Ah, of course it is. I mean...
And guess how long Duke Nukem Forever took to develop?
Was it, 14 years?
13 years.
13. I was close.
Yeah, you were very close. What an amazing guess. But yeah, so 13 years and 9 years, we can see kind of like a pattern of working on these things for so long that you think that they're going to be big. And it's more than just you think that...
It almost has to be big.
Just give me a second to reset my brain so that I can talk properly.
It's almost like the game has to become big. It has to be this... Yeah. I guess, to borrow from stuff that Slavoj Žižek has said, like, it's ideology, for the sake of itself, right? It's the game or no, not Zizek. What's it? Jean Baudrillard. You know, the real thing has become the image has become its own thing, right? So the idea that the game has to be this massive thing has become part of the game itself.
It's this idea that we've put so much time and energy into this that it has to be big. It can't be something that fails. It's almost. So I brought up Game of Thrones Season 8 earlier for a good reason. Okay, I have been... And I know people are probably getting sick of hearing about this, but I've been writing a book. And I've been working on this book for about 7 years now. Because of, just like life happened and I couldn't get around to it. And I can fully understand the desire to just finish something. Just get it out there and get it done so that you can move on to something else. And so I look upon Season 8 of Game of Thrones a bit more charitably now. But what's happened with this game is that it's almost the exact opposite. Where it's not just about finishing it now. It's about getting it out there as fast as possible because you know in your heart of hearts that it's going to be the most amazing thing that anyone's ever seen.
Yeah, precisely. I think, coming back to the distinction between overhype and overpromise, I think that the fact that The Witcher 3 became one of the most popular, well-received games of all time, I think cast this massive shadow on CD Projekt Red's next project. No matter what they were going to do, I feel like people were already going to come in it with expectations about what it was going to be. And I think here's a great example of where there might be some symbiosis between overpromise and overhype. Because, of course, if everyone is saying, hey, CD Projekt Red are the best game developers in the West right now, then, it's clear that they might feel, oh, yeah, maybe they might be buying their own hype. Like, yeah, we are the best guys. We can do this. We can basically skirt the razor-thin edge between mediocrity and excellence and produce something that will basically blow everyone's pants off.
Yeah. I want to apologize for the pollution in my audio for this episode. I really need to buy like a cave or find like a subterranean lair or something that I can record in, because I live in a fairly small house with my parents and my animals and things. And what you heard earlier, that creaking noise, was my door opening because my cat, who was annoying us so much earlier in the video, wanted to leave again. So that's kind of where I'm at. So sorry if I'm going to be a little bit mad for the rest of this video, but it's a culmination of my pet's refusal to respect my recording times.
Sure. If you want to hear Callum's pet's frantic screams, you can subscribe to the Patreon.
Don't say that, because it makes it sound like I'm torturing them. If you want to hear my cat whine for no reason, because he is the most taken care of animal on this earth, then feel free to subscribe to our Patreon to hear me berate my cat to my friend Emilio.
That's going on the blooper reel for sure. But anyway, please continue. So we were talking about Cyberpunk. So there was this confluence of overhype and overpromise that had met in a very toxic place, where not only did everyone expect CD Projekt Red next project, try saying that 5 times fast, but not only did they expect that project to be amazing, but also I believe in a large way that CD Projekt Red started to believe that they could just 100% deliver the next big thing, the next great RPG.
Yeah, and it's clear from the marketing campaign. I mean, can I give you a short list of the things that CD Projekt Red marketed with?
Please do.
Do you know Sprite?
The drink?
Yeah, there was a specific CD Projekt Red Sprite can, a Cyberpunk Sprite can, and it was targeted at the Poland market. So in Poland, you could buy Cyberpunk Sprite. There was Cyberpunk Old Spice.
Anyone who's playing Cyberpunk is going to use deodorant.
Okay, wow. Let's just alienate all of our viewers. There's a
specific... That was a mean-spirited joke. I apologize, viewers.
You could potentially win, I think. It looked like there was a bit of a competition, but you could either win or just buy it. But you could buy a Samsung Cyberpunk television. a 4K gaming television specifically for playing Cyberpunk. There was a Cyberpunk Xbox, but that's fine. That's like expected. There were a company called Crop, which is a Japanese brand, made Cyberpunk hoodies and T-shirts, and there was also Cyberpunk pizza boxes from Dodo Pizza.
What?
Yeah, they appear in the game, I think.
Oh my goodness. That's not... okay. So those are clearly examples of overhype, but what would be an example of overpromise? Because I know you were bringing... You had some examples of those. Like, what comes to mind when you think, okay, CD Projekt Red promised that this would be true, but then it didn't end up being the case?
Okay. Well, here's just right off the top of an article I've been reading. They promised real-time AI that would grant over 1,000 NPCs a variety of roles and actions that, complete with the day-night cycle, was designed to change up their routines. Have you played Cyberpunk?
I do not have a computer that wouldn't instantly melt if I tried to play Cyberpunk, so no.
Fair enough. You know what happens when you talk to an NPC in Cyberpunk? They tell you to leave them alone.
So that's realistic.
Literally every single NPC tells me to leave them alone.
So they just are incapable of actually interacting with you.
Yeah, unless they're specifically there for a quest or to give you a quest. They literally just say, leave me alone. And I mean, look, it's very impressive how every NPC kind of looks different. Although everyone said that, and I saw a bunch of NPCs who looked the same, except like one was a white guy and the other one was a black guy.
Okay, that's a... okay, well that's... I mean, sure, on the face of it, AI is hard to make. Maybe you could make an excuse about that. But there were other promises. One that comes to mind for me is they promised it would be available on a variety of platforms.
It would be available on a variety of platforms. They promised that it would operate smoothly on a variety of platforms.
Yeah. That is a more specific claim, and you're totally right. Like, I think because I've heard that Cyberpunk works fine if you have like a juiced up PC. But the problem is they promised it was going to work on the PS4?
Yeah.
Like last gen consoles? If I'm not mistaken, Cyberpunk's development predated the newest generation of consoles. So they had no way of knowing that there were going to be... I don't even know if the newest generation of consoles are even strong enough necessarily to play Cyberpunk, which is not a good thing.
I remember there was a big controversy where a bunch of people were trying to get refunds for Cyberpunk, and they couldn't because it was... But you can't really blame CD Projekt Red for that, because I think that was due to like Sony and Microsoft's refund policies.
Mm-hmm.
And eventually it came through. But when Sony brought Cyberpunk back to the PlayStation Store, because it was removed for a few months until 2021... when they brought it back, it came with a little disclaimer that said user experiences are still not good with this.
Ooh.
I'm paraphrasing, obviously, but yeah, they said basically do not purchase this for PS4 systems.
Yeah, they were giving you a warning, and that is actually a good example of overpromise, because there they are saying we're going to be able to deliver this on all platforms. We're masters at video game optimization. We can make this run on last gen hardware, and then they can't. I'm sure we've all seen glitchy videos of Cyberpunk, basically glitches and stuff like that. It was clear to everyone, I think. Well, maybe not everyone. It was clear to some people that not all was in the development cycle, and that something was rotten in the state of Denmark, so to speak.
Oh yeah, totally. I love Willie Blake. I've had a long day.
Yeah.
The jokes aren't happening.
The jokes are happening like this. Cyberpunk Callum is turning into a Cyberpunk NPC.
Leave me alone.
Yeah. So going back to, the idea that the CD Projekt Red had kind of bought their own hype. How much of the problems of Cyberpunk do you think can be attributed to the fact that they felt that they had to deliver on all of these things? They had to say, hey, our game is going to have the best AI, we're going to have the best storytelling. and all of these things, when they could have actually pared back the expectations. They could have said, okay, well, we're not going to make a first-person game when we've never made a first-person game. It's still going to be a third-person game, and we're not going to do this, we're not going to do that. We're going to just try to iterate on the formula, not necessarily try to revolutionize it, right? Because to me, it sounds like they promised that Cyberpunk would be a revolution instead of an iteration, and it ended up being a step backwards instead of a step forward, at least in some respects.
Yeah, well, that's the issue, is that I actually want to bring this idea of the lie of minimum requirements.
Okay. What does that mean?
So I think in several videos that we've already posted, I've talked about how I played games like Jedi Fallen Order and GTA 5 and things on my computer, and my computer exceeds the minimum requirements for them. And I do believe that my computer exceeds the minimum requirements for Cyberpunk. But for some reason nowadays, minimum requirements means you will be able to start this game, and then it will chug like a Microsoft PowerPoint presentation for 3 hours before crashing and burning. And it's this idea that companies are totally okay with saying, like, you can play this game. You have the minimum requirements to play this game as long as you turn all the graphics settings down, without, actually testing if low-end PCs can do that. And Cyberpunk falls prey to this in so many ways, where it feels like you said, they couldn't possibly know that the PS5 and the Xbox Series X was coming out, but it seems like the game was designed for that. It's an optimization problem, and that's the problem with, like you said, Revolution, is that you keep pushing for bigger and better machines to play your bigger and better games, and a lot of people will say, no, but they have to make the games bigger and better because the machines are getting bigger and better, but the machines are there to facilitate the games, not the other way around. I feel like there is a big community movement towards having bigger and better stuff to justify your purchase of a super expensive computer.
I totally agree. I think it is very much a reciprocal kind of Ouroboros here, where we have gamers who are expecting bigger and better games, so they buy bigger and better hardware, and games companies who are like, oh, the gamers are having bigger and better hardware, so we can make bigger and better games. But the reality of the situation is that we're both, in some respects, caught in this vicious cycle. And until we can extricate ourselves from it, until we can say, wait, you don't have to keep making every game that breaks the previous ceiling of the other game. You can just iterate around. You can just improve things. It kind of is this problem where, like, even the bigger a studio gets, the more successful it gets, the less creatively free it actually in some ways becomes, because they have to do what their fans expect of them in some respects, or they let them down. And I wasn't expecting CD Projekt Red to want to try to commit to over revolutionizing the games industry in the way that they had, but I think they felt that they had to do it because there was all this hype around The Witcher. Granted, I think a lot of people tend to forget that The Witcher 3 is the best game in the series, and it largely overshadowed the first two games. Hardly anyone ever talks about the first two Witcher games. They are not as great as I think, the CD Projekt Red would like them to be. And it took many, many years of iteration before they could actually get to a stage where their production quality was at the level of their, vision. And I think they flew too far, and like Icarus, they got burned in the sun of video game reviewers, IGN scores.
I remember hearing that the CD Projekt Red developers' bonuses
Mm-hmm.
were linked to review scores for a while. But
Really?
they had to ditch that because the review scores were coming in so badly.
That's like with the Bethesda and what's it, Black Isle, for Fallout New Vegas, they wanted to tie the bonus paid to the company based to the Metacritic score, right? Something like that.
And it's like, it's almost like you're now expecting your developers to work on commission.
Ooh, yeah, that sets a very toxic precedent, I think.
Yeah, but to go back to comparisons for a second, you want a weird comparison that no one makes?
Sure.
The Sims and Spore.
Whoa.
Because Spore is a huge overpromise, isn't it?
Yeah. I remember categorically people like Spore is, the universal simulator that you've been waiting for. Here is a game that can meet all of your demands for simulator games forever. And it's not that good. I actually don't really like playing Spore because a lot of after like the very initial novelty of designing a little organism wears off, the game is kind of boring. There's not really all that much to do.
Yeah, and here's the thing that I'm going to link Spore and Cyberpunk to. So both games declare freedom in character creation, right?
Yeah.
But in Spore, you have to like staple body parts to you to be effective in the creature section.
Mm-hmm.
And if you don't specifically remember to go back and edit your creation so that it looks the way you want it to, you are stuck with this horrific Frankenstein's monstrosity of body parts and whatever, and you just have to like staple tribal symbolism to it. And in Cyberpunk, I don't remember particularly anyone going on about how good the character creator was, besides like the fact that you can, customize your dong. But I do remember starting the game and seeing the character customizer and thinking, wow, this sucks. There's like 8 haircuts here. What the hell? I'm supposed to be able to make any character I want in this Cyberpunk universe, and I have the option of being like one of 8 specific hunks with their attributes randomly shifted around.
Yeah, in some ways, actually, Cyberpunk even in a way failed to deliver on one of its core premises. It isn't really that much of a role-playing game. From what I've been reading, it seems like it isn't so much that you are creating a character that is truly well and truly your own, but it's more like there are a bunch of preset positions that you can get into and then follow those spots down to their conclusions.
Exactly. I didn't feel like I was playing a role in this game. You get an origin story, which is one of the 3 classes from the original Cyberpunk game.
It's Nomad, and something else?
It's Nomad. They call it Street Kid, but it's basically the solo class, which is just like a mercenary. Mm-hmm. And then you get like Corpo, which is someone who runs a business. But that has no bearing on the game at all. You don't get extra skills for choosing the one or the other. You don't get a special thing. The only thing you get is like special dialogue options. And that's not role-playing. That's not immersing myself in my character's backstory, because I've ended up in literally the same place every time.
Actually, in a way, you could almost say that the Cyberpunk story could have been made better if it was just a linear story, rather than if they tried to tack on a role-playing system.
Definitely, you didn't need to give me those origin stories at all. You could just, like, say, this is who your character is, and then however you build it. Just do what, I think it was Oblivion that did it. Like, however you build your character, it dubs you a certain class. No, it was Fable. Fable 1, I think. However you build your character, you got, like, dubbed a certain class.
Oh, boy. Peter Molyneux must be brimming. He just received a tingle down his spine when he heard that someone was praising character design in Fable.
In the far-off kingdoms in space, he's, like, enclosed in a crystal.
His cryotube
crack just appeared on it because someone is finally praising Fable.
Yeah. The cycle is now at its apex. Soon the world will know fear once more.
Yeah, but you should just given me that option. So like if I put a lot of points into tech and stealth, maybe I get dubbed a Netrunner.
In a way, I actually like those emergent kind of gameplay systems. I do think they have faults. I do think there is a tendency where a lot of players, if given a choice between speccing in those ways, I think they tend to generalize because they have FOMO,
Oh, yeah.
Actually, definitely. I would argue that's kind of the Elder Scrolls problem as a whole. Like, why on earth would a character who is the master of the Thieves Guild join the Fighters Guild and be as proficient as fighting and then also as magic? It's like, you just kind of end up being an every person. You end up being like a super special snowflake. And
yeah, except I will say this, from reviews and things that I've seen of Cyberpunk, it seems like you can be basically good at everything by the end of the game, except for like one skill. There's enough skill upgrades where you can be like super fully upgraded in stealth and combat and tech, and then just like not very good at hacking.
I wanna throw a little bit of contrast, because I've played the System Shock games, and I've played System Shock 1, and I especially played System Shock 2. And I will tell you that the System Shock experience, with the use of the cyber modules to as your upgrade points, and the fact that you get so little of them, I found that to be a much more meaningful role-playing experience, because I only had a couple of skills. I spec'd myself in tech weapons, basically, and a lot of the shooty bang-bang weapons. So I couldn't do psionic powers. That whole part of the game was completely just locked out to me. I couldn't do anything with those weapons. I was very vulnerable to a lot of those enemy types. But I had a lot of fun just gunning down, a lot of the enemies, playing the game almost like a pseudo Doom-like, a Doom clone. Yeah. And then when I finished the game, I was like, okay, I did that. Now let me try playing it without, with using the psionic powers. And it's a totally different experience, right? It plays a lot more like, it actually plays a lot more like of one of those, like a first person, like a magic game in a way, like a first person, like melee combat kind of game. Because you're running around desperately.
Magic 'em up.
Yeah, magic 'em up, yeah. Like Dark Messiah Might and Magic. Like, you're running around the area, like, using your psionic powers to, like, disrupt the enemies and hack, turrets and stuff like that. You're just constantly moving, constantly, thinking about your mana and stuff like that and how to replenish it. I was only like, okay, do I have enough bullets to kill these guys? Do I have enough, health kits to keep replenishing, my health? That was all. I was playing the game like a Doom clone. And then I suddenly switched everything. It's like, oh, yeah, my mana is regenerating, I'm using resources that I wasn't considering before. I think that is an option, right? That is an option of how you can make a game. So you have very limited choices. A generalist approach will be okay at everything, but you are better off just picking a route and picking a playstyle and sticking with it, right? That's not necessarily... Yep.
That doesn't really apply to Cyberpunk, because what I've played of it, I found that I was investing points in shooting a lot, even though I didn't particularly enjoy... Like, the gunplay is fine. It's not, like, terrible or anything, but I wasn't intending on making a very shooting-heavy character. It's just that, like, every place I went into had guns, and there are so many encounters where it feels like shooting everyone is the only option, because you are a solo. You are a mercenary. Your whole job is killing people, so you need to be the most effective at it.
I remember, because we briefly experimented with doing a Cyberpunk role-playing experience. We were going to play Cyberpunk Red. And I remember reading through all of the class descriptions. You've got medias, you've got solos, you've got executives, techies. And I was thinking in my mind, like, yeah, the only character class in this system who actually should be relatively good at killing is the solo. Every other character class should be, okay at it or bad at it, in the case of my character, because I was playing... an investigator type. But, like, yeah, it seems to be that... And maybe here's one of the other issues, is that they promised that it was going to be an FPS game. Why did they do that? Probably because FPS games are more immersive, right? If you're trying to sell an immersive game, there's a reason why the immersive sim is an FPS game, right? Generally speaking. So I think here is an example of, they promised immersion, and they tied themselves to a combat system that actually can be kind of immersion breaking.
Because, like, okay, a lot of people like loot and shoot. A lot of people really enjoy that. But I think the least immersive thing about a gunfight is spending 30 minutes after it hoovering up every spare piece of crap you can find around the office you just had, like, an action movie explosive battle in for about 15 minutes so that you can make a new pair of pants. And just while we're hopping on this... I made a character that I eventually was like, okay, yeah, he looks okay. He's sort of... And I got him a bunch of clothes that I thought looked really nice. But almost immediately, I had to make him look like a complete and total idiot. Because the new clothes just looked better. I had like a camo flak jacket on. And a samurai mask. And like cargo shorts. I looked like an idiot. And I was like, I don't want to roleplay as this chode. I want to go back to wearing a suit.
Why did you have to do that?
Because they don't have armor in Cyberpunk, but they still have armor stats.
What? That's crazy.
Yeah, so clothing provides you armor because it's like synth cotton or something.
See, that's a part of the game system that makes no sense, because I remember thinking about the Cyberpunk, because I was trying to make a character for the Cyberpunk game. Is like, okay, I'm not going to wear any armor, but I'm not expecting to get any gunfights, so I shouldn't have to worry about that. If we were going to have a character who was going to wear armor, they should expect to get into gunfights. The fact that they didn't have armor is kind of ridiculous, because
it's not like you have like zero armor. There is like body armor and stuff, but it's clothing. So you don't like put it on and then you look the same as normal, but you've got like a higher armor stat. You put it on and it goes over your clothes, and it ruins your style. And this whole game is built around style.
I feel like, they added that ability in, I think, all the WoWs to transmogrify armor, so that you could have an armor of any kind of look, but you could take particular stats. I wonder if maybe
let me glamour it.
Yeah, I wonder if maybe it would have been better to just instead of trying to keep the best of both worlds and try to keep an armor system, but it interferes with the clothing. Because I do agree, it's probably more realistic. You have to wear your armor over your clothes anyway, unless you're running into battle naked. But the idea maybe should have been to de-emphasize armor in that kind of way and just make armor, more of a generic resistance, where, they're maybe abstracting away that by like, oh, you've got, bionics, you've got cybernetic replacements or whatever. You can take bullets. And you can focus on the clothing, because that's like really integral to, because even in real life, most people aren't running around wearing armor all the time. They're wearing clothes all the time. So they want their fashion maybe to be more forward.
Yeah, I would have loved it if it was just like a Disco Elysium type of thing, where maybe some clothing gives you better charisma or whatever. It makes you look cooler, and so people want to talk to you more. But
it all comes back to Disco Elysium.
Yeah, it's the Disco Elysium Mobius strip, but you just let me glamour it so that I can still look how I want to look. Because if I find like the one good hoodie in this game that actually looks good, or the one cool jacket, your starting jacket looks really cool. I want to wear it, but it's terrible. I will get destroyed in a gunfight.
Yeah, this is again something like part of role-playing experiences, I think, is meaningful choices, right? One of the reasons why people like a lot of the old Fallout games, myself included, is you don't actually really need to do fighting. Like, if you don't want to fight people, for the most part, the game will just let you sneak or talk your way past enemies. And there are lots of people who play New Vegas, for example. They roll around, wearing suits and stuff like that, because they are, generally speaking, using sneaking and talking to solve all their issues. They're not actually getting into fights, so they don't need to wear any armor.
Yeah, every Fallout game I've ever played, I've made a character with super high charisma, with the intention that I was never going to get into a fight.
Ken, is that something that can actually happen here?
In Cyberpunk? No.
In Cyberpunk? Mm-hmm?
No.
No,
not at all.
That is such a wasted opportunity, because again, if you're going to promise a role-playing experience, then you actually have to promise role-playing, which means sometimes people might not want to be a gunfighter.
Look, I've played a lot of the game, probably not most of it, probably not even to halfway, because it's super long. But I've played a lot of the game, and from what I've seen, there's just so many instances of being forced into a mission. And sometimes you can stealth through it, and sometimes you can hack the cameras, and sometimes you can just meet the boss and talk to them and give them what they want or whatever, and then you're good. And sometimes, like early on, there's a mission where you can hack someone's like memory card to get like a bunch of money, and then you can have the choice of either giving that money to the boss and leaving, or you can keep the money and shoot your way out. And, like, that's a nice choice. I had thought that I was going to see that in the rest of the game. And then, for the most part, it was like, oh, here's a new mission. You can either sneak in or shoot everyone on sight.
I wonder how much of that was actually because they had originally planned more of a scope. And again, this whole problem with Overpromise. They promised that the game was going to have these features, but the closer it got to development, the less able they were to actually deliver on these features, and they started cutting back the scope. They started doing what every student, the night before a assignment is due. They start really drastically cutting back what it is that they're actually planning on doing, and they're hoping to trying to hit the bare minimum.
I will say this though: the mission I was talking about is the mission from the like demos and stuff they put up, where the guy who has the like Cyclops face threatens you. So it makes sense that was the one that they delivered this kind of gameplay on, because everyone's like, "Oh man, this is the moment from the trailer. I love it."
Yeah, of course.
And then every other moment was just like an in between.
Yeah, because like again, when it comes to what it is that you're trying to do, when it comes to what it is that you are actually saying is going to be in your game, you have to be very careful. I think to move a little bit away from Cyberpunk, just sort of in general, I think that game development is a messy process. I'm not going to say that it is a smooth, you have every idea figured out and then you just do it straight, bingo, bango, boom, it's done. Obviously, things will change. As you start to actually make the game, you will come to realize, I can actually do this, I can't actually do this. Therefore, I think it's always important to be very clear and precise as a developer what it is that you're capable of doing, and knowing beforehand what it is that you can do and deliver with the time and budgetary constraints that you have.
Yeah, definitely.
When you start to believe your own hype, I think, what's the word? The BioWare magic, which is not so magical anymore. This idea that, maybe the project managers have messed this up completely and bungled everything, or not everything, but a majority of the things. Oh, we'll just fix it because this is the BioWare magic. It will just have the staff pull, double or triple shifts, and they're so passionate and dedicated, they'll just do it, when, like, no, you shouldn't have to do that to make a game. You just have to be careful with what you say you're going to be able to do. And
yeah, don't promise a universe if you can only deliver a planet.
Exactly. And obviously, as you mentioned, a part of the reason why this is happening is, because there is a toxic relationship between gamer expectations and the games industry. But I think the other problem is just that, and here's maybe my perspective, is I feel as if many developers, there's a disconnection. We spoke earlier about a contradiction between the game buying public and the game making industry. And I think maybe there is another contradiction here between the people who actually make the games, the developers, and the people who are actually making the decisions about how the game gets made, right? Because I've seen interviews with developers, oftentimes, on Jim Sterling's channel, that make great content, good actual journalism from time to time.
Not like what we do here.
No journalism here. This is tabloid news.
If anything.
If anything, yeah. We're above a listicle sometimes.
This is the graffiti you read in the bathroom.
Yeah. But, sometimes you'll see that there are plenty of developers who don't want to be doing the things that they're doing, but they are told that they have to do it by the publishers, basically, by the people above them. Their managers, their project managers, company executives who are saying the game has to be like this, make it happen, And, go ahead.
Thank you. The marketing campaign for Daikatana?
Yeah.
With that poster that said, John Romero is going to make you his bitch?
Yeah, who can forget?
That was a decision between John Romero and one other person, and they made that decision and they put it out there, and they later regretted it and everything, and it caused a lot of beef between them. But basically, that one decision made by two people who were very high up on the chain colored the opinion of the game for the rest of its release. And
arguably after its release as well.
Yeah.
Anyone who knows about Daikatana knows about its infamously terrible marketing, and there was a rare example of people trying to overhype something and utterly failing to actually properly hype it up. And in fact, they just overpromised and completely underdelivered on that one. But yeah, I agree with you. I think that there is a small percentage of people in the gaming company who actually have the huge sort of wide-reaching company power. And a lot of those people are actually disconnected from the reality of making those games. I have to wonder how prevalent overpromise would be in the AAA space particularly. Right? We're not talking about the indie space. In the indie space, the guy who is selling you the sauce is also the guy making it, so to speak.
It's like family-run businesses.
Yeah, yeah. You're paying some depressed guy on the internet money so he can make a game about like a child wandering through a dark, whimsical world. No prizes for guessing which game I'm talking about, but
all of them, every single one of them.
But with the AAA space, it's the case that you have professionals, sometimes career professionals, people with decades of game experience under their belt, who are told to do things that maybe they wouldn't believe in or do if they had the ability to say. If like how many of the developers in EA would say, okay, well, the game has to be able to do this. We're going to promise, we're going to state that we can deliver this kind of game, and then the game public will rag on them for that. I feel like the consequences of that are not felt by the same kinds of people. How often do you find like some random guy on Twitter making arguing against or harassing like a voice actor in a video game? Like all the people who harassed like the voice actors for like The Last of Us. Like, and
I know I harp on this a lot, but the writer for Dragon Age 2, one of the writers who got all those death threats sent to her.
Yeah, exactly. Like that person wasn't in a position to be making the kinds of decisions that you think they were, right? They were a writer on the game. They weren't like, one of the executive producers or one of the managing directors. They were a writer. They often probably were told to write certain things along certain lines. I think a lot of gamers underestimate the degree to which the AAA space is like a strict, composed, very rigid hierarchy. There really aren't many game studios, and I think maybe Valve is one of them with their Cabal method, that experiment with less hierarchical structures. And I'm not a fan of hierarchical structures, especially ones that make bad video games.
Yeah, but I will say that there is probably a correlation between the lack of hierarchical structure in Valve and the fact that they don't really make games anymore.
True, there probably isn't as much of a direct impingement on like, hey guys, we gotta make a game. I'm gonna make us all make a game. Gabriel Newman. Gabe, he can't drag everyone kicking and screaming into Half-Life 3 even if he wants to. I don't even know if he does. But like, yeah, I think that's
I don't even know if he's still Valve CEO.
I don't think so. I feel like this is one of those things where he would have retired and just like rode into the sunset on all of his money, but people still associate him.
Yeah, it's like I have no idea. I have no idea what's happening in Valve. I have no idea who works there. I have no idea who's running it. And that's the kind of company that Valve is now. It is in and of itself a shadowy cabal.
Well, Callum, to be fair, most game companies are like that, right? The only reason why we know about like so many people like Toby Fox and so on is because they're the one guy who made the game. But we don't really know, like modern video games have really de-emphasized the actual people who make the products, right? I mean, they get credits, sure, but they aren't like strongly associated with the video games. That's why maybe it's easier for people to rag on the voice actors than it is like the marketing manager or the executive director,
While we're in this vein, I do want to say that I watched the like public apology video from CD Projekt Red, and one of the co-founders does implore people to not rag on or verbally attack their developers, because a lot of the decisions were made by the higher ups, and he does say that it was him and a lot of people in his position that wanted the game to come out sooner, and it's not the developer's fault. And I think that's a decent way of handling that, until you remember that they basically enslaved their employees.
Yeah, it's like the evil overlord would be like, mea culpa, guys, I know we screwed up, but don't blame our serfs or our minions.
This one was on me, guys.
Yeah, Sauron.
I'm sorry. Don't blame my slaves.
Sauron goes on Twitter. It's like, guys, don't try to cancel the Uruk-hai. It was my fault that I did the war on Middle Earth. I'm sorry.
That was my bad. Yeah, soz.
It was a Tuesday. We've all been there. Am I right?
I'm just imagining Sauron with that like Snapchat thing, and it's like, just heard about slavery. Damn.
Or Sauron doing like a YouTuber apology video. All right. Okay. I think that if we're on to Sauron being a Snapchatter, I feel like it's time for us to end this episode.
Yeah, probably. We're just about out of time, and I think we should take this cyber moment in cyber time to cyber thank all of you cyber supporters of ours?
Yeah, we have to thank our patrons who really pay for this craziness to happen on a regular basis. We would like to do a shout out to the patrons who are appearing on screen right now, and then we would like to especially thank our patrons at the gigabyte tier: Liam Anderson, Forrest, and Ilya Stope. Thank you for subsidizing our crazy show. We really appreciate it. If you want to support Bytemarks, you can support our Patreon. But if you don't have the money, please don't donate if you aren't in a position to do so. If you would like to donate but wouldn't like to donate regularly, you can buy us a coffee. We have a link for that in the description. Callum, what else?
Please check out our socials. We are on Instagram and Twitter at BytemarksCast, because someone else was already Bytemarks somehow.
We will fight that guy one day and get it.
I'm not going to make any promises like that. But yeah, follow us on Twitter, follow us on Instagram. We don't really post that much on Instagram, but we're posting on Twitter every now and again. We share videos with some of the people that we've collaborated with, like Realm W.
Yeah,
I recently appeared on his channel. Check out that video; it's really cool. And also, no need to follow the Curious Cat link. If you'd like to ask us a question, feel free. But we do have something special planned for the 500 subscriber special. It's going to take a bit of work to get together, but I think you guys are going to enjoy it.
Yes, we don't want to give away the goat about what we're trying to do. But we certainly are doing something kind of special, which might maybe be a presage of more things to come.
Yes,
yeah.
And finally, please like and comment and subscribe and share us around. If you're listening on one of the audio platforms, then leave us a review or a rating or something. It helps so much with the algorithm, and we're not like common content, we don't really follow a lot of the things that the algorithm supports. We don't make short videos, we don't do a bunch of the other things I'm sure there are, so we don't get picked up a lot on searches. But if you share us around, if you like and comment on our videos, we've seen the difference. It's huge.
Yeah, look, we don't want to... I feel always scummy doing this whole shilling thing. But the truth of the matter is YouTube is a system. We have to use it. So we are trying to get to 1K. We really appreciate it if you guys actually like the show, if you want to see us make more of this. If you
don't like the
us.
show, tell us. Tell us why. Yell at us.
Yeah.
Feel free.
We'll make a channel on the Discord for just people yelling at us.
Please.
All right, I think that's enough.
Yeah.
I'm Emilio. He's Callum, and this has been Bytemarks.
Good
Bye,
night.
everyone.